Welcome to ProjectME, the podcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Carter, the founder of ProjectME, multi-millionaire entrepreneur, former TV newscaster, money-making expert, female empowerment speaker, and self-proclaimed office supply addict. My mission is to take the mystery out of making big money. Every week on ProjectME, the podcast, I'll share success tips, strategies, and stories from other entrepreneurs, experts, and millionaires, showing you exactly how you can achieve your most exceptional life. Now let's get to it. You all know I love sharing my secrets of how I went from $17,000 a year to a multi-millionaire. My top essential tool for managing my two successful businesses, plus my crazy life, is my paper planner. But not any random planner, specifically my Inner Guide yearly planner. The Inner Guide planner doesn't just organize my schedule, it helps me map out and discover my goals, dreams, self-care, and keeps my millionaire mindset on track. I want you all to get planning right away for 2019. So I arranged to get a special Inner Guide discount exclusive to my ProjectME posse. Go pick out your favorite yearly planner at inner-guide.com. And at checkout, use the code ProjectME 15% off, and you will receive 15% off your entire order. If you are driving or multitasking and can't write this down, the Inner Guide link and code is in my Instagram bio at ProjectME with Tiffany. And remember, as I always say, you are either planning for success or heading to failure. You are listening to the podcast ProjectME with Tiffany Carter. My loyal listeners know this already, but just in case you guys forgot or you're a new listener, I love teaching you about making big money doing what you love. Plus, of course, sharing how you can achieve great success much faster than I did. So today you guys are in for a special treat. I have on the master of business masterminds and the host of the top podcast for the love of money, Chris Harder. Hey, Chris.
Tiffany, how you doing?
I'm doing great. You guys, I seriously am like a really weird like ninja stalker when it comes to guests. And I knew I wanted to do an episode where predominantly we're talking about like how you can achieve that success and up-level your business faster. And I knew that person was Chris. And so we made it happen for you.
I cannot wait to have that conversation. Your intro, when you're like, hey, my specialty is helping you succeed faster than I did. That's such a passion for me too. So we're going to crush it together.
I mean, I want to hear about some of your ride. My ride is actually very similar time duration as yours is. And that's why my passion is to help you guys do it faster, because I've learned from some major mistakes I've made and things that maybe weren't mistakes, but I could have done better. I mean, so why not get there faster? So tell us a little bit.
So here's kind of the 30,000 foot overview version of my story. And you can always do a deep dive anywhere you want, but I'm Midwest born and raised. And the cool thing about being from the Midwest is this: you are given like really good foundational things, like good morals and good family, values and good work ethic. And if you can take those foundational values to one of the coasts where everything is going on, you can totally crush it. And I feel like that's the space where we're in right now. And when I say we, I mean my wife, Lori, and I. But the ride from growing up in the Midwest to where we are today in California has been like one of those crazy roller coaster rides with the loops and the dips and the whole 9 yards. So I'm a college dropout. And when I say dropout, I actually mean I was kicked out of college for partying too much. After 2.5 years, the college is like, we don't want your tuition. Just go. You're embarrassing us. And so I was kicked out of college. And here's the crazy thing. My parents were devastated, right? They thought the key to a good, happy, successful life was get a really good college education, then get a really good job and have a really good family and all that stuff. And me, that's not what I wanted. While I was there, I had zero interest in being like in college and learning. I wanted to be out participating in the economy already. Like I had that drive from an early age. So they were devastated. I was excited. And of course, what's the next step after you get kicked out of college? Go get a job. So I got a job at a car dealership. Why? Because I loved cars. So it made sense, go do what you love and the success will come. And in a way, that totally held true, because in 18 months, as this kid that just got kicked out of college at this car dealership, I quickly became the the number one salesperson there out of like 25, 30 people. And after doing that, I was promoted to their finance department, and then I was promoted to run their finance department. All this within 18 months. It happened really quickly. And I learned two things during that quick 18 months. I learned sales and I learned leadership. And if you can learn sales and leadership, I feel like you can write your ticket anywhere. Like those are two ninja assets to always have in your pocket. Now, at the time, all my friends are starting to get into the big mortgage boom and the big banking boom, and they're making a ton of money. Of course, I wanted to make a ton of money too. So I went and applied at, well, it turned out to be the world's largest international bank. And remember, I'm kicked out of college, so I didn't have a degree, and a degree was one of the requirements. So I talked my way into this interview, and when I get there, Todd, I remember specifically, he introduced himself and he said, hey, you know, I've already picked out somebody for this job, but this interview is on the books, and so we're just going to kind of go through with it anyways. And just something clicked in me. I'm like, oh no, you're choosing me. And by the time I left that interview, he said, I really thought I'd found my person, but I'm going to make an offer to you. So go home, I'll make an offer. So I talked my way into that job. And then I talked my way and performed my way right up the ranks. And I was one of the fastest rising executives at the world's biggest international bank. And that was fun and it was awesome. It was full of great experiences. And it was like this positive sales and leadership atmosphere the entire time until the recession hit. And when the recession hit, it went from all that positive stuff to absolute negativity and people struggling and, you know, lots of mystery about what's happening to our jobs and all that. And I had to fly around for an entire year, waking up first thing in the morning, getting on an airplane, leaving my wife in bed and flying to some random ass town and shutting down their branch and telling people one by one by one. You know, I'd say, Tiffany, I'm letting you go today. I'm going to answer any questions you have about your severance package. I'm really sorry to have to do this. And that was the worst year of my life. I mean, emotionally, it was the worst. Productively, it was the worst because I wasn't chasing anything positive. I wasn't growing. I would go to my hotel every night and I would just eat and drink comfort food and alcohol. And I gained 30 pounds. And so because I was miserable in all those ways, of course, my marriage was miserable. Everything was just shit and rock bottom at that time. So something had to change, and it became my turn to either take a severance package or to take a demotion of a demotion of a demotion of a demotion and run a branch in Jersey. And I said, give me the severance package. I remember it's funny because they said, well, don't you want to go home and check with your wife? I'm like, trust me. She's so miserable and pissed off about our situation right now. She wants me out of here. And that's what I did. I took the severance package. Now, here's the crazy thing. And this is a show about finances, and this is a show about entrepreneurship and making it happen. So I got to share this part of the journey. While I was young and flying up through all these promotions, I had my values on wrong. And my value was, how many people am I managing? What does my title say? Am I being a good provider for my wife? And my version of provider was laughable. It was, can you go pick out a home and cars while I go get on an airplane again? And you know, how great does my life look like outside looking in? And heck, this was even before social media. So with social media, I can only imagine how, you know, bad this would have been compounded. And so we were always living like way beyond our means. And actually, I shouldn't say we, because I ran the finances. So I was always leading us way beyond our means. And when I had to take this multi six-figure severance package, it all went to debt and getting rid of the house and getting rid of the investment properties, getting rid of all the cars we had and all the everything. Like I was selling furniture on Craigslist so that we could get back to just below zero and start all over again in a tiny little apartment in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now, here's the crazy thing. And I promise to put a bow on this little journey in a moment here. But here's the crazy thing. When you are stripped of your bullshit identity, then you have the opportunity to choose new ones. And that was my chance. And it didn't happen overnight, but that was my chance to say, wait a minute. If this identity was not serving me in any way, then, or not any way productive, that is, then what value do I really bring to the world? And what do I really have to offer? And how do I really want to show up if I have nowhere to go but up anyways? And that became the beginning of the entrepreneurial journey that people know Lori and I for today.
Wow. I knew some of his story, you guys, but I didn't know those little nuances. That's why when you interview someone, it's so cool. That's why it's such a passion of mine to hear about that and your humility and the fact that you had your identity, your false self was attached in, you know, the title, the, you know, executive management, all the stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in a way, when I look back, sometimes I'll catch myself saying, oh, I'm not proud of it. But actually, you know what? I love that story. I love the journey I had to go through because that was a good young age to be able to learn these lessons before I had a full-blown family, before I had bigger responsibilities, before I made real money, because at the time I thought that was real money. Now I understand what real money is. And so it was a really good time to learn those lessons and get them out of the way so that when I was given all the gifts that we've been given today, I do the right things with it.
So is this why a huge passion of yours is helping people get to where they want to go, doing something they love, and get there as efficiently as possible?
Yeah, it's one of the many reasons. One of the biggest reasons why is this. I remember waking up in corporate America in banking and not wanting to be there anymore, but feeling like I had no other choice. And I had nobody to wake me up and say, you have other choices. It seemed absolutely unrealistic at the time. I thought forever I'm going to be a victim to having a boss and having rules and having a life where I'm always fighting for the next promotion with everybody else. And then the part of the story that I didn't get to tell was when I left that bank, there were no opportunities in the recession other than a friend of mine, Todd, the very first person that hired me in that interview. He had a tiny little mortgage brokerage at the time. And he came to me and said, hey, you've got skill sets that I don't have, and I've got skill sets that you don't have, and I feel like we'd be a great fit. Let's go grow this thing together. And, choosing to grow a little mortgage brokerage at the tail end of a real estate and banking recession was not my first choice, but I had no other choices. And I felt trapped. At least my perception was I had no other choices. So I took that partnership, and while we crushed it in business, we were always reinvesting in that business. So I was stuck financially still, not making any headway. And Todd and I had such a toxic partnership that after 36 months of growing that into a huge mortgage bank, I didn't care what the trajectory was. I had to get the hell out of there. And it was being at that back against the wall. I'm so unhappy. I don't want to do this the rest of my life. That made me say, I'm getting out of here. I'm going home with Lori and we're just going to try and grow her brand. I wish I would have had guidance. I wish I would have had options. I wish I would have had podcasts. I wish I would have had all these things that would have woken me up sooner. So do I wish I didn't go on that journey? No, not at all. But it would have been really cool had somebody been able to help guide me a little bit quicker in a different direction a little bit sooner.
You guys, you see why I've been following Chris forever is because he is the male version of me. Like we like the same shows. We have the same cars. It's really trippy sometimes. But
we're probably long lost brothers and sisters.
I have a very, similar journey as my listeners know. And thank God, Chris, that you did go through all of that because you had to go through that in order to show up and be the person you are today at your masterminds and who you are even outside your mastermind, just when you're talking to people or when you're sharing tons of valuable information, in your Instagram stories or anything like that. Otherwise, right? I wouldn't go, okay, well, Chris knows what he talks about. You have to go through the shit in order to shine.
You're really doing it. Here's my favorite reason I got to go through all that. Now I find the value in everything I do, and I find the value in every day. And I'm in a position to be really, really happy. Had Lori and I been given all this success and, exposure and all that stuff, and I hadn't been able to reframe my value system and how I show up in the world and what I care about, it would have been really bad. I'm sure we wouldn't be married still. And I'm sure that I'd be leading a pretty unhealthy, toxic life. And I'm sure that I'd be making a lot of bad choices that are just magnified now that I've got a bigger tool called money to magnify it. And so I'm like beyond grateful that we went through the shitstorm because it was the time that we got to reinvent and decide how we're going to show up.
So a lot of my listeners and followers are kind of in that zone you were in, and it doesn't matter how much you're making. $15 an hour, you can feel stuck at 15. You can feel stuck at 15 million a year, and I can say that. So you can feel stuck at either zone. So give us some idea of the process that can help people who feel stuck going, well, okay, I don't know. I know I don't want to do this, but I'm not sure what I can do to make money in order to get out of it. What do you say? What do you say to people who are in that spot?
Yeah. So this one will rock a couple of worlds. And that is, number one, acknowledge that you do want change. Acknowledge that whatever trip you're on right now is not the right one for you. Because a lot of times we won't even face that. We won't even acknowledge. We're like, well, I've got it pretty good. I should be grateful for this. I should be grateful for that. And we're just selling ourselves on this bullshit trip where we're really not happy. That's number one. Acknowledge it. Number two, and equally important, make a list of what you are willing to give up, including your ego, in order to switch directions. This is the part where everyone gets stuck. Most people will acknowledge it. They'll wake up one day and say, enough is enough. But they're not willing to sell the truck, sell the house. They're too worried about what the neighbors think, what the family thinks, what the friends think, what the coworkers think. They're not willing to, do stuff that might be considered weird or woo-woo. They won't do the do. They won't set their ego aside in order to get themselves out of the situation. And that is the key. You have to be willing to sell your gigantic home or whatever it is you're attached to, right? Insert thing here that you're attached to. You have to be willing to part with that. And you have to be willing to part with this protection of ego that we all fall victim to so that you can put yourself in a position to go pursue what you want to pursue. I have friends and clients all the time that they'll say, I really want to do this and that. I don't have the money for this site. I don't have the money for this funnel. I don't have the money for these Facebook ads. How can I get it? I'm like, sell your cheesy ass entry-level Mercedes with your stupid $700 car payment. Like, there's your Facebook ad budget. Set your ego aside. I speak from experience, right? Ego is my greatest overhead. It's my favorite phrase I've ever made up for myself. Set that shit aside, and that is what'll free you up to take the risk. Because then when you set your ego aside, you could give two shits what other people think about you, and you're willing to take the risks.
Yeah, and the thing for me, you guys, was my ego and my stubbornness had me do like what I would add is like the third thing to Chris's point is asking for help. I didn't want to ask for help because I felt like I should do it. I should figure it out on my own. And that's ego, right?
Oh, that's such a big example of ego. Not asking for help. And I've struggled with this big time. Not asking for help is really just saying, wait a minute, what if they already think I'm good at all of it and they find out I'm not? That's really, when you want to ask for help, that's what it is. A lot of people will say is, well, I don't want to ask for help because I don't want to burden other people, right? And they may mean it when they say it, but you're still protecting your ego. Your ego that you're protecting there is saying, if I feel like I am a burden on someone, they will not love me. So protecting the fact that they might love me right now is really just protecting your ego because everybody wants to be loved. So I'm telling you, you got to set that thing aside. And that is what will make you unapologetic about going out and just like crushing everything you want to crush and dragging it back to the cave and finally getting what it is that you're after.
Yeah, it wasn't until, which is, how the universe works. It wasn't until I asked for help after 5 years into my first business, I couldn't get out of the six-figure zone, which by outsiders' standpoints, it's like, Tiff's doing great, whatever, but I still couldn't get to my next goal. And the little catch there that whatever you believe in, higher power, God, magic, whatever it is, Tiffany had to humble herself enough to ask for help.
It's so true. And, you just remind me of something else to piggyback on your question of, okay, what should people be doing to position themselves to change this? Start throwing yourself into a tribe that won't accept your mediocrity. And everybody, no matter where you're at, you're still within a form of mediocrity. Lori and I, in some people's eyes, we're absolutely thriving. In other friends' eyes, we're being quite mediocre, and they tell us that. And listen, some people might be hearing this right now and be like, well, those aren't friends. Or some people might be hearing that right now and say, well, I don't want to hang out with people that are always going to make me feel like I got to do more. But that's why you're not doing more. We purposely and intentionally seek out tribe over and over and over again that will not accept the mediocrity that we will play to, and that will shake us by the shoulders and tell us, hey, you're capable of so much more. Hey, you're not taking risks. Hey, you're playing kind of small over here. Hey, it's laughable that you're only making X, Y, and Z on this. And we love having those friends because they're the ones that get the most out of us. And when somebody gets the most out of us, we make the most impact, and we are the happiest because you're always happy on the journey of growing. You're never happy when you get somewhere. Does that make sense? Getting somewhere is actually very anticlimactic. But going somewhere, growing somewhere is exciting as hell. And without people forcing us to keep growing somewhere, then we won't be happy.
Yeah, it's like when, you win an award if you're in corporate America, or maybe you've launched a course or something like that and you hit your number. How long do you really relish in that? And that's enough. It's not like for 3 months, you're like, I'm amazing. I crushed it. I'm great. That wears off pretty quickly. It's like, okay, what's the next thing? Right?
Yeah. If I'm being fully transparent, like I don't care if it's my wife's world titles in fitness. I don't care if it's the awards that I've gotten, the articles from Forbes, all that stuff. It's so anticlimactic that you go on a walk together or you sit in your hotel room together and you're like, I thought this would feel different. Like, if I'm really being honest, we have these conversations all the time. We're like, I thought this would feel different. What's next? And some people would be like, well, stop and put yourself in the moment. Make sure you celebrate it. And we do. We'll celebrate a moment. But it's just not as climactic as everybody hopes. So you better be in the growing phase all the time if you expect to be happy. That is the absolute and utter secret to happiness.
So is this why you created For the Love of Money Masterminds? Because you mentioned tribe, you mentioned, being basically held accountable by this tribe to keep growing. Is this where your passion for masterminds came to play?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been a part of a lot of masterminds, and some have been life-changing, some have been crap. And I realized there's a real art. There's a real art to, creating a good mastermind. And just because somebody can put one together doesn't mean they should be putting one together. That's a really important point. And here is, Tiffany, there's a lot of things I've been really bad at, as I hope I've put on display so far. I've got a few things that I'm really good at, though, that I've always been able to lean on. And the one thing that I've really been able to lean on my entire life, whether it was in banking or whether it was in building a giant network marketing team, or whether it was in building my wife's brand and the staff, the team that we have now, all that stuff, I know who to put in the room and how to get them to collaborate so that all of their individual efforts as a sum are far greater than if they did not collaborate. I can always recognize who's going to succeed and who's not. I can always tell you who's going to get along and who won't. I can always tell you who's going to help somebody grow and who's not, who's going to be a distraction. And it's been the one superpower that I've been able to rely on forever. So what better way to put that on display and lend that to other people than to put together these masterminds where you put the right personalities in the room and you do the right exercises to encourage collaboration and growth. And you bring the right speakers in that they'll receive in the right way. And, there's a science to doing this right. And to be able to do that makes me happier than any other thing that we're involved in right now.
I love that you said you've been to crap masterminds. I've been to crap everything. I've been to great parties. I've been to crap parties. It's like, just because you have a lot of friends and a caterer doesn't mean you should throw a party and that makes you a great host.
Oh my God, what a great analogy. That's an awesome analogy.
It's so true. And I'm just like laughing. I'm thinking in my head, like, of all these situations I've been in. But I want to go back to something that you said that is, I truly would say, is a superpower of yours, is what is it? How can you tell if someone is going to be a success or not? You said you can kind of tell. What are some kind of clues or behaviors or attitudes that you can see?
Yeah, I can't kind of tell. I can really tell. It's crazy. It's scary how accurate it is. First of all, there's an it factor that I can sense in somebody. And I don't know how to quantify this it factor for you, other than it being a mysterious it factor that almost like an energy that I pull out of them, like, oh, I know you're going to make it. That's number one. But your question is, what are other traits and what are other things that people can quantify to know if they're on the right track, if they're going to make it or not? And the first one is your willingness to be open. And this is one that people forget to, check in the mirror on. How open are you to outside help? How open are you to new ideas? How open are you to stripping yourself of ego? How open are you to not being attached to your way being the right way? Because the more open you are, the more you'll receive radical, new, extraordinary ideas, which will accelerate your path. Your whole entire brand is about accelerating, women's entrepreneurs' path, right? And people's path. That's the number way to accelerate your path, is just be more open. Number two, consistency. I will take a consistent person over an incredibly talented person any day long. And there's story after story, people with no background, very little talent, very little anything, that just roll up their sleeves and they have enough persistence and consistency to figure it out and become a smash hit. So I will always, if I was picking kickball teams right now, I'm going to choose not the best athlete. I'm going to choose the person who's most consistent for sure. The other thing is how giving and how caring of a personality they have. And this takes one conversation. Ask them a little bit about their life, ask them a little bit about their background. And you can tell if they're a giver or if they're a taker. And giving is the secret to everything that you want in life. And it's also the secret to rapidly accelerating your success and to how far you're going to go. So those are a few things that you can actually quantify. Do I have these traits? Is this my ethos or not? And the people that have all those things, their percentage of success is radically higher than the people who don't. And here's the cool thing. Most of those traits can be learned.
I love that, because in people who I've worked with over the years, whether, it's from my first company or my second company, which is ProjectME with Tiffany Carter, when I speak and I talk to people afterwards, I always find it interesting in the questions people ask me. I always say questions are statements in disguise. I'm sure someone else said it, but I'm borrowing it.
So good. It's so good.
And the questions that I get asked, and I'm going to kind of do like almost a little role play with you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's go.
So I love role playing, and not in a weird way, you guys. So when someone will ask me, Tiffany, if I attend this person's mastermind, or, I do private coaching with you, or I come hear you speak somewhere, does that mean that, what's my guaranteed ROI? Like what's my guaranteed return? Does that mean this course that I'm trying to put together and launch will make me $100,000 a year then? So Chris, if I attend your mastermind, and my new brand that that I've had going on, am I going to go from making 100,000 a year to $1 million a year in 12 months?
So, and you're asking what my answer to that would be?
Yes.
My answer to that would be this. I would say common sense says I can't guarantee you any kind of a result, but trends coming out of my mastermind show you might be selling yourself short. You might go from 100,000 well past $1 million. And you might also shoot for the stars and land on the moon, so to speak. And you might end up at 500,000 in your first year. Either way, that is extreme and rapid growth. And either way, you're going to discover things about yourself and put yourself on the right track of sustainable entrepreneurship so that you will have wealth beyond your wildest dream for years to come.
Now, what does it say to you as the man with the superpower? What does it say to you of the person who is even asking you this question when you are speaking to them? Maybe they're interested in your mastermind or something like that. I
mean, to really use your example, someone that wants to go from 100,000 to $1 million, what it tells me is that they don't quite have a grasp on scaling and what's possible. Because I understand that question and I've seen people do it, but at the end of the day, that's not the right question. The right question isn't, can you guarantee me I'm going to go from 100,000 to $1 million? The questions they should be asking are my goals realistic? Do you think we could craft a plan to get there? What would be the upside and the downside? What is it that would help me get to where I want to go? That your mastermind offers, they'd be strategy questions, strategic questions. And the best thing that somebody could ask me to get into my mastermind is, how can I add value to the other people in that mastermind to make sure that there's an equal energy exchange and they're going to want to help me back? And when somebody comes in and says, how could I add value to the other people there? That's my heart opens right up to them. Oh, you're in,
And that's a rare question, I'm sure, that you get asked.
You know what's funny? I hardly ever get asked that. I turn it back on them all the time. Every single interview to get into the mastermind, I'll say, if you were to get in, what would you be most excited to share with the group? What assets do you have that you'd be most excited to share with the group? And I can tell from their answer right away if it's something quality that they'd share and the group will grow from, or if it's something that's they haven't put any thought into it, or it's not really their ethos. There's people that show up as accidental takers, right? They're not bad people by any means. They're just so focused, and maybe they've had a hard ride up till now. They're just so focused on how do I get out of where I'm at right now that they're an accidental taker. And then there's other people that show up and it rolls right off the tip of their tongue as to what they can offer other people and why offering other people X, Y, and Z might also come back around to help them.
So this term you just used, accidental taker. First off, I will borrow it, but I'll credit you for it. I'm obsessed with it. So I can see myself in probably, I'd say even year 6, 7 of my first business. I was an accidental taker because I was getting burnt out. I was very similar to your story. I was burnt out. It was a lot of negativity. I not only hired people, that's fine, but I also had to fire people. If someone isn't doing their job, I don't really care. Doesn't hurt my feelings, but it's hard when they are doing their job. It wasn't pretty. I became an accidental taker. It was, my mindset was like, how can I make more passive income so that I don't have to depend on this, on this big income I'm getting over here from these certain clients. And I was in that mindset. It was almost like a desperation mindset. And when people show up to someone like you in that mindset, right? What do you work with them on? Because they're not really a taker by nature. They're just in a jam.
Yep. So I tell them, we have a really good conversation about it. I'm not afraid to have that conversation. A friend of mine, May, she always says this quote, and I think she actually got it from Tim Ferriss as well, who I've heard say a version of it. And that is, your level of success will be in direct proportion to the number of difficult conversations you're willing to have. And most people would shy away from this conversation of correcting them and helping guide them towards having a different perspective. But with me, I'm happy to have that difficult conversation. I'm happy to say, Tiffany, I'm not sure that you're a good fit right now. And I want to tell you why. And I would love to tell you why so that I can actually be a part of your growth. And maybe that means next year you'll be a fit. And then I'll go into the conversation. If you're coming from a place right now of lack and you're coming from a place right now of desperation, and I understand it because I've been there before as well. And I'm not judging you for it. I'm actually loving you for where you're at right now and helping to guide you to where I think that you want to go. And, here's how you're showing up from a place of lack. And here's how you're showing up from a place of desperation. And here's how it comes across to other people that you may not be aware of. And people actually receive that conversation so well because nobody else is ever willing to tell that to them. Everybody else just wants to get off the phone and ghost on them, Or worse yet, everybody else wants to say, no problem, come on in, as long as you can pay. That's worse yet. I'd rather have those conversations and have a super kick-ass human come back around the next year and be ready.
Yep. And you know what? The best advice that I've ever received were from those few people I can count on one hand who were willing throughout the years to tell me what no one else would dare tell me. Mm-hmm. And because I was able to listen, I didn't get nasty or defensive, even though it didn't feel good.
Yep.
I was able to hear that. So that's also someone being a true friend too.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there's a lot of ways to help humanity. And if you wake up and you really feel like, if you really subscribe to the idea that we're all here to do our part, then doing your part doesn't just mean doing your part when it's convenient. Doing your part means like doing your part all the time, whether you feel like it or not. That's really how you serve humanity. And if that means some tough conversations that help put people on a different path than before they got to you, then great, be it. That's literally my goal. I was such an egotistical asshole, like in my high school and college and early career years. I do not like who I was, but I didn't have to remain that person because I had people, sit down and have the difficult conversations with me and help open up my eyes. And, I put myself in circumstances that forced me to also do that. And I'm grateful for that stuff. So if I can be that part of someone else's journey, fantastic. Because there's good people inside of every, egotistical asshole out there.
All right. You were inside there, right?
Yep, absolutely.
I was in that zone. I won't even say on the air one of my worst, ugliest lines that I said on an airplane that like 2 people know because it's so bad. And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, oh, I need help.
But if that's not who you are now, I would imagine that you could share it with the caveat of, I'm proud that I've grown from this place and I want to show everyone how far I've come so they can too.
Maybe I'll get there. It's real bad. It's real bad, Chris.
It's probably also real effective for anybody else that needs a wake-up call.
Fair. I will get there. I promise. Now, of course, I'm going to get like 8,000 DMs. Like, what is it?
Yes, I want everybody DM Tiffany until she gives up the goods.
I'm even turning red. If you guys saw me right now, I'm turning red because I'm still embarrassed for that person, even though I'm not that person. But anyway, so I want to know and I like always asking questions for my audience. Like one of my like zones of genius is I know what they really want me to ask. And so I ask it for them. I'm like the avenue for them. So there are a lot of entrepreneurs that I'm sure you have analyzed their business, reviewed their business, where on paper, they're saying, right, my business is X many years old and I'm making 200,000 a year, or I'm making even $1 million a year. But when you start peeling back the layers, they have almost no net profits.
Yes.
And when you see people, whether they come into your mastermind, you're, working with them one-on-one, whatever it is, what do you see as usually the issue when someone's making a lot of revenue, but there's very little profit?
I see exactly what you just said, and that is they never have sat down to analyze, I'm bringing in X for top line revenue, but what do I have for profitability? Like they get so caught up. And by the way, this is not a judgment. This happens to almost everybody on accident. Here's what happens. Here's how most businesses really get started. Somebody says, oh, I'm sick and tired of my situation and I've got a great story to tell. So I'm going to build this course, or I'm going to build this event, or I'm going to build this product. And they throw it out there and they sell 25 grand worth. They're like, whoa, I didn't expect that. That's cool. If I did it again and I tweak this and I tweak that, I bet I could sell more. And they tweak this and they tweak that. And this time they sell 50 grand. And now they're like, whoa, this is a real business. And they've sold 75 grand worth of whatever. And so they do it again, and now they're at 100 and 150 and 200 grand. And because the only focus has been, how do I sell more than I did last time? They've never sat down to say, do I have the right corporate structure in place? Do I have a good tax plan? Do I have the right insurances? Am I making a profit? Am I spending too much on ads? What levers am I pulling and investing in that actually give me my biggest returns? What's the 20% that gives me 80% and what's the 80% that only gives me 20%? Pareto's law. No, they never take the time to do that. Not because they're bad at business, but because they kind of ended up with an accidental business to begin with. And nobody ever sat down and gave them that awareness.
Yeah, I remember it was my second or third year in business, and it was a purposeful business. I did a side hustle and transitioned. But what no one told me is you don't necessarily make any major profits your first couple years in business. Yeah. So I was very confused, number one, that I had to pay taxes 4 times a year. Like, what's happening? And 2, on paper, it looked like I was making, I don't know, at that time, I think it was like 200,000. But my actual take home profit was less than in my corporate job. I was very confused.
Yeah. And there's people that are throwing money at shortcuts that they don't have to throw money at. And that is eating away at their profitability like crazy. There's too many half-assed coaches promising you this or promising you that. There's too many Facebook agencies promising you this, promising you that. Listen, I'm all for hiring the right help, but there's too many people that are hiring just some shiny referral that showed up in their DMs on Instagram. And they are costing themselves so much revenue that they don't have to piss away if they would just slow down and make more intentional choices.
So with that being said, give some tips or some protocol that people can follow in terms of hiring the right help, meaning whether it's your mastermind, whether it's hiring me, whomever, Sally, Joe, whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay. I love this. So here's the first thing. Most people will say, I'm starting a business, or I make 50 grand, or I make 100 grand. Should I hire this coach? And I apologize if I'm killing any business for anybody here, but quite honestly, if you're trying to go from 50 grand to 100 grand, you don't need a coach yet. You just need all the information you need out there is still free. It's on podcasts. It's on opt into this, opt into that. It's in books. Remember those things that used to sit in things called libraries, right? That you can now download on your freaking iPhone. It's in the books. everything that you need to succeed up to 100, 200, 300 grand, you can get for free. You can be resourceful enough. Matter of fact, we live in the day and age where anything can be Googled and 99% of it you can find for free. So be more resourceful than taking the damn shortcut right now, the shiny shortcut. But there is a time and a place where you do need a coach or expertise or a class or something to help you get past a plateau or to bring you into an area that you are ill-equipped to go into, but you are headed for anyways. Because as you grow, it brings brand new challenges like, who should my first hire be? Or am I paying too much for my product? Or am I doing this or am I doing that? And that is where you need the guidance that it makes sense to start hiring for. And everyone's favorite question is this: who should my first hire be? I would say in 80% of businesses out there, your first hire should be a jack of all trades, ninja skilled integrator personal assistant. That should be your first hire. Somebody who speaks languages that you don't. I don't mean literally, but I mean, if you are the visionary, they are the integrator. If you are great at coming up with ideas, they're great at putting them on paper and creating the map of how to get there. They can clear anything off your plate that is not income producing. Your job should be spending all of your time on income producing activities and farming out things that are not income producing. So your first hire should be this incredible Swiss Army knife personal assistant who takes so many things off your plate so that you can go do the things that you're really good at. And that's probably the second tip right there is too many people try to do it all. They try to be good at all things. And at first you have to, because you have to be resourceful. You don't have the money to do that. But there does come a point where you are holding yourself back. And I've done this for our businesses before, because you don't want to invest in this person, or you don't want to invest in this agency, or you don't want to invest in this thing. And now you're overdue for investing in those things, and you're choosing not to do it. And you're trying to do it yourself, and you're putting out a half-ass product with half-ass results and half-ass this, and you're costing yourself so much revenue because now you're being penny wise and dollar dumb. So it's funny. It goes from, if you could almost picture a bell curve or something, it goes from you should be more resourceful in the beginning and hire less help to all of a sudden you need to be very self-aware to stopping to try and do everything at a certain point and start to hire experts that will put a much better product faster out there for you.
Oh yeah. And I've done it the crappy way and the smart way.
Yeah.
Luckily, I did the crappy way first. It's not like I did the smart way and then repeated the crappy way, but I definitely have done both.
Yeah. And I'm sure right now everyone's saying, well, how do I know when that is? I bet that's on everyone's minds right now. Number one, it's intuitive. You know when you are just hiring the shiny shortcut and you shouldn't be yet. And the inverse of that is true. You also know when you are just doing way too many things that you're not very good at that you could be hiring out to somebody and it's slowing you down. So intuitively, number one, listen to your intuition. Number two, ask for help. Reach out to people who have already gone where you're trying to go. Tell them what you're doing and where you're at and ask them. Remember, they've already gone there. Ask them, is there anything you see that I could be or should be doing differently? Or is there something I should be farming out that I'm not farming out right now? Or is there a piece that I'm missing? And again, that's free. It's free to find an expert who has already gone where you have gone before and ask them, here's my situation. Go ahead and poke holes in it for me.
What I always say to my audience is you guys ask. I'm telling you, ask me. You can send me an email. You can send me a DM. And I've proven that I answer each one in detail. And I know you're very giving like that yourself. And what amazes me is, I mean, your audience is much larger than mine, but when I look at the percentage of people I know who follow and engage with me versus the percentage of people who are asking the question, it's like you guys need to ask the question. There are people like Chris, there's people like myself. I'm sure Lori's very similar. There's a ton of my own personal mentor and business coach. He's worth $100 million. He loves it. He calls it, oh, this is so organic is his line. When someone, messages him on Facebook or something.
Yep.
But a lot of people don't ask.
Mm-hmm. They think that their message is not going to be seen or the other person's too busy. And sometimes that'll happen, but you don't know if you don't try. And it's this epidemic of not trying and making the excuses to, they probably wouldn't see, they probably wouldn't respond. That's the epidemic that's holding everybody back. And you got to remember, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. You just, at the end of the day, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Be the one that makes enough noise to get noticed.
So when people are maybe in a zone where they're considering a mastermind, or they just know that they get a lot more out of a group format versus maybe one-on-one, or maybe they've done one-on-one, it's not enough for them, what would you say they need to look for in a mastermind? Because that's a little different than maybe a one-on-one coaching experience.
It's so different. So first of all, the value of a mastermind is the tribe that you are investing in, along with the new ideas that'll be injected into that mastermind over the period of 6 months or a year. So look for this. Number one, is it being led by somebody who has already been there, done that for the stuff that you are trying to do? Number two, ask questions about who else is in the mastermind. What are their businesses? What are their revenues? And see if it's a group that's going to be slightly below you, therefore you're doing all the teaching, or if it's a group that slightly scares you, therefore you're going to be doing the majority of the learning. And you want to always be in the mastermind. I always say, talk your way into the mastermind you don't belong in yet. Like that's the magic one to be in, because that's where you're going to up level the quickest. The one that scares you, the one where they're like, sorry, you got to be at 300 grand to get in, and you're at 250 and you talk your way in. Like, be in the mastermind that you should not quite be in yet. And that is going to be your fastest way there. But here's some other things you got to watch out for. And ask to speak to other people, or for referrals from people who've already been in it. Like, don't be afraid to ask for these things. You learn a lot by asking those things. But look for somebody that is willing to keep their mastermind intimate, not just going for numbers. There's my elite mastermind, which it takes 300 grand to get in, but most people are in 500,000 to 4 million in there. That mastermind, I have capped at 34 businesses. I could put 100 businesses in there in 5 minutes. The reason why I've capped it at the right 34 people is because anything larger than that would allow somebody to hide if they are a natural introvert. And if I took their money and created an atmosphere where they were allowed to hide, then that's not on them for being the hider, like everybody else would say. That's on me for receiving their investment and creating an atmosphere that allowed them to hide. So there's little intricacies like that you should be asking about. Tell me how many people will be in the mastermind. Tell me why you've chosen that number. What percentage of the mastermind is learning from new speakers, and what percentage is collaborating intentionally with the other people? It's some of those questions that will give you some very revealing answers.
I love all of that, because what I think about is when I played tennis in high school and college, and I would cringe when my coach would make me play against like the number 1 or number 2 player, because I was probably, if I'm being honest, is probably like number 3 at best. And I hated it because I knew, my ego knew, there was a high likelihood I was going to lose or miss a lot of hits and that kind of thing. And that doesn't really feel good. But like you just said, my coach's whole premise is this is how you get better. You play with someone who's your equal or you're better than, you're not gonna be forced to push and grow. Yeah,
it's so true. Put yourself in the room that scares you. Find the friends that scare you. Ask people to dinner that scare you. That's the place to be. It's the fastest way to the top, is to just surround yourself with the scariest possible situations.
This is not the answer I know most people want to hear, because not many people want to be scared.
Nope. And that's their ego holding them back, right? They don't want to look foolish. They don't want to look dumb. They don't want to fail. They don't want fill in the blank. The problem is you have to not care. The problem is you have to want to succeed so bad that it makes all the other not wants pale in comparison.
So what would you say in your years of owning, multiple multi-million-dollar businesses? Share with us like one of your biggest mistakes.
Oh God, where do I start? One of my biggest mistakes is I have been the one who has slowed us down hiring cheap help or cheap say a cheap website designer, a cheap funnel builder, a cheap this, a cheap that. And we've spent more money and it's taken a far longer time to get where we wanted to go because of always wanting to do something on the cheap, of not wanting to go hire the best. So that's a huge mistake that's easy to fall victim to. And I've done that to us a bunch until, enough was enough. Another one is your tolerance for anything less than a thoroughbred teammate. So thoroughbreds are, if you could see the big group text message that we have with all of our team, everyone who works for us, it's called the thoroughbreds. And what we mean by a thoroughbred is just like the race horses. They come from the best pedigree, and they're going to be the fastest and the best out there on the field, and they're going to try the hardest as they're coming up on the finish line. And everything about them is an absolute thoroughbred. They're not a pretty good horse. They're a freaking thoroughbred. And settling for anything less than that will crush you. Like settling for someone who's a 9 out of 10 might sound like not a very bad thing. Oh, I like them and they do a pretty good job and I don't want to hurt them. They're going to be your Achilles heel. You need somebody who is such a ninja on your team that they actually make you show up bigger because you don't want them to figure out that maybe you're not going to try as hard as they are, right? So you have to have a zero tolerance policy around hiring anything or anybody other than a thoroughbred.
What scares most people, and I've fallen because, I'm your long lost sister. I've fallen, that's one of my biggest mistakes is, focusing a little too much on the finances, like that bottom line versus my intuition. I get a little too fixated on the numbers, right? But I've learned over time that'll end up costing you more money than hiring the damn thoroughbred to begin with. Yep. So can you speak a little bit on before we end all this, can you speak a little bit on how in business, sometimes when you're looking at your numbers, your revenue has to take a dip before it can skyrocket?
Yeah, for sure. We're actually doing that this year coming up. Nobody knows that, but we're going to be doing an incredible right turn, so to speak. And I call it a right turn because it's the right direction for us to go into, but also the visual of just like all of a sudden taking a right turn. And we're going to be stepping back in some of our, thriving, flourishing revenue sources in order to go all in on this right turn that we're taking. And listen, you can't do that if you're living paycheck to paycheck. You can't do that if your ego is attached to your top line revenue. You can't do that if you're so stuck in your identity of here's how I show up in the world, or here's what I'm making, or here's what I do. So this goes all the way back to like, set that shit aside, set that ego aside. Your ego is your greatest overhead. It's going to cost you more than anything else. So we're literally living out in this next year what your question is. And that is we're going to ratchet back some revenue sources so that we can get the running start and have the bandwidth in order to go after this much, much bigger fish.
And you guys, I bring this up because I talk about it all the time. It's not like your business is, okay, I grow, maybe it flatlines, maybe it dips a little, then it grows again. You want to go real big on something, almost all the time, it's going to require you to invest a shit ton of money, more than you ever are even going to be comfortable with, in order to propel you, 10 times forward or 100 times forward.
Yep, without a doubt. Every single time. You got to take those steps back to get the running start.
So where can people find out if this mastermind of yours that is very hard to get into, you guys, if it is something for them, or if you feel that they're a good fit for this particular group?
So there's a couple places. Number one, go to fortheloveofmoney.com/mastermind. That's FOR, fortheloveofmoney.com/mastermind. You can get all the answers to what does it look like and what's included and all that good stuff there. And if it appeals to you, go ahead and fill out the really quick application so that we can have that phone conversation to find out, is it a really good fit for you? And are you a really good fit for the room? And this is the part where I encourage everyone, like, don't let that negative self-talk chime in. Don't let that ego chime in. Don't let that fear of rejection chime in. Because if you follow through with filling out that application, if you feel called to be in this room and you feel called to lift up other people's businesses at the same time as having yours lifted up, then why not take the swing? Why not see if you can get your foot in that door? Because getting in that room, getting in that door, it's a life changer. It's a game changer in every way. It's a holistic approach. at having a happy, thriving business, because most people, they sacrifice either happiness or they sacrifice thriving in business. And this is a holistic approach to both. So that's the best place to find it. And go find me on Instagram. It's the only platform I hang out on these days. It's how you and I connect. Like, I'm Chris W. Harder on Instagram. And just like you, I've promised to answer all my DMs. So.
And it's true. He answered mine. So I'm just saying I know he'll answer yours. I'm vetting it. But you guys do us a favor. You got something great out of this episode. Take a screenshot and tag Chris at Chris W. Harder and tag me at ProjectME with Tiffany so that we both can see you guys listened. You like it. We want to see that. We want to see you love it and share it. And you got something great out of it. And of course, any questions about this episode, DM Chris, DM me. And we'd love to, clarify further or answer any of your other questions about your business.
Yeah, tell us your favorite takeaways. That's always my favorite thing to see.
Thank you so much, Chris. It was such a pleasure having you on.
Tiffany, totally my pleasure. You're such a great host, and it's a privilege to hang out with you.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a 5-star review on iTunes. Not only will this make me super happy, but it will allow more listeners to find our special show. Simply help me help others.